Frank, I want to start with an interesting thought exercise that popped into my head. We know who the teams are that are sitting there and contending for a Stanley Cup. We know who the teams are who are firmly rebuilding, and we'll talk about them in just a second. But I want to talk about the teams that have interesting decisions to make this offseason, and not from a should we trade this guy, should we sign this guy, but more of an organizational philosophy question of should we continue to try to keep our window open, or should we bite the bullet and go into the rebuild? I'm going to give you 4 teams: Nashville, Washington, Vancouver, and Calgary. Which one of those teams do you think should be, nope, trying to keep that window open? And which one of them maybe needs to look in the mirror and go, we aren't making the playoffs. We aren't a contender. We need to take the step back.
Well, I think the Vancouver Canucks have already answered that question for us, that they think that they're ready to take that step. No surprise, because it's kind of been their MO, Tyler, the last couple years, is to try and compete. And the Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout essentially kicks their cap troubles down the road and gives them some serious flexibility right now, $7+ million in additional space. Plus, they have an LTIR candidate that brings them somewhere around $10 million worth of space that they can go out and do something with. Which team do I think, should go in the other direction? That to me is the more interesting question, is not which team should push, but which teams should probably continue to go and rebuild. And a team that sticks out to me in that group is the Nashville Predators. Yes, they have the goaltender in UC Saros to remain competitive. And yes, they have some pieces at the very top of their lineup in Philip Forsberg and Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson and Roman Josi, of course, on the back end. But I just don't know that they have the depth to really get there in the short term. And maybe that's the easier part to build than going the other way. But for me, I look at the Preds and I say they're kind of the team that's most stuck in neutral, that, they need a push one way or the other. And we seem to get an indication from David Poile on his way out with the pieces that he traded before the trade deadline, that they seem to be signaling that direction. But what we don't have any real sense of yet, Tyler, is what exactly and how does Barry Trotz feel as their new GM?
Well, and it's also interesting, Frank, to look at a team like that and know that Barry Trotz is taking over in year 1, right? That's going to be a GM who has term on his deal, and that's a franchise, as we saw with David Poile, that was very loyal to their GM. So you get the sense that if Barry Trotz wanted to kind of take the step back, go through a little bit of a rebuild, that he would probably have the leash to do exactly that. You mentioned Josi and all the other important pieces. I mean, Forsberg and Saros are 28, not getting any younger. Roman Josi is 33 years old with 5 more years left on that big contract as well. So their key pieces are getting towards the edge of their prime, but their GM might need to take more, or might be willing, I should say, with the Terminals deal to take more of a long-term view. They're interesting. What about the Washington Capitals? I know we had some questions on the inbox last week, but is that a situation where, like, kind of like the Penguins as well, as long as Ovi and Crosby are there, those two teams are going for it?
Yeah, I think part of the deal with re-signing Alex Ovechkin to the contract that he did as he continues his assault on the record books and chasing down Wayne Gretzky for the NHL's goal-scoring title is that they sort of have promised to him that in the meantime, they're going to try and remain as competitive as possible. And Brian McClellan has not a blank slate, but he's got a real opportunity now to build around this Caps team, that he finally, for the first time in a long time, has some cap flexibility, has some open roster positions. And, you see things like the Sandin trade last year at the deadline, something that, get a little bit younger, try and remain in this window to win, and maybe do it on the fly a little bit. At the same time, you look at a team like the St. Louis Blues. Yeah, they were able to do it and have a younger core with Kyrou and Thomas, etc. But they also traded away a lot of pieces along the way to be able to gain that flexibility. So that's sort of where I envision the Caps trying to continue to be competitive.